Hi, I'm Teresa Chang.
Hi, I'm Felicia Grant Cummings.
Hi, I'm Kim Johnson with Moms Navigating Autism.
Last week on Moms Navigating Autism.
All excited to go off to college. We packed her up and with many challenges to, get her packed up and organized to, go off to school for the first time.
He was going through anxiety. And so when the school mandated the vaccine, my son wasn't ready to get the vaccine yet. So I told him to take a leave of absence, which he did.
So hopefully this is going to be his placement for a while, and that he does well and strives and he likes it still. Like I said, it's like so routine for him. He waits for that bus still to come. He's excited to see it come. When it's not coming, he's antsy about it.
The paths that each of our kids have taken now are just 3 examples.
Right.
There's other kids. Some kids don't go to college. Some kids go out and their parents have them find a job. They contact Access VR, and by all means, I totally encourage you to find the resources available through the agencies in those states, counties, wherever. Access VR helps kids write out resumes. They help them find jobs. But some kids, they go to trade school. Trade school is actually pretty good, and there's lots of scholarships out there for kids with going on to trade school.
Absolutely.
So and that's fine. If your kid can do it and wants to do it, I totally encourage it. Some parents are sending their kids over to BOCES to some of their programs to teach them how to cook, to teach them how to whatever. If your kid is interested in it, let them try it. You're not going to be around forever, and maybe they can find something that can help support them.
Absolutely.
Remember, you're not going to be around forever. So look at Section 8, put them on that waiting list, because there is a long waiting list for it. And maybe by the time that they're ready to find an apartment, or, they'll be able to access Section 8. But definitely look towards the future. I can't stress that enough. Look towards the future.
You're talking about the future and places to live and stuff like that. And I know some individuals that live independently, not in a group home, not home with their parents. But how do they get matched up? Because I know some of them from this local area, there's some of them that roommate together. Who helps them find their placement and their person when they find these apartments and live together like that? Is that through their day hab, or is it something like Section 8 that matches them up to live together? I know some of them found on their own, but
I believe that there isn't. But Tara Klein, she started something through a group on Facebook to match people up with people,
a buddy, a partner, a roommate, yeah,
so that they can get a roommate, so that they could share an apartment or something together, because that's important too.
And it's crazy because rents now, I know rent in our area, it used to be cheap. It's not cheap. So then I'm thinking, how do individuals like that are working, I'm guessing that they get Section 8 or get money to live, because I don't know how they would live on an income like that. Or
Section 8 pays you a certain amount of money. You go out there, you're approved for this voucher. They go out and they get money. They approve them for a certain amount of money. They go out and find an apartment, and it's paid through Section 8.
Mm-hmm.
I also encourage people, if your child is living at home and needs a little extra cash, if they have special needs, apply for SSI. You can always say once they graduate that, put it on hold, but at least you'll be in the system. It's easier now to get it now than it will be in the future. Just like it was easier to get it in the past than it is now. But it's $500-600 a month, and they could only spend it on certain amount of things. as of right now. And actually,
You have to report that money when you do SSI, like they tell you, where did you spend it this month? How much was used on rent?
Right.
How much was used on food?
right. And you can
Yeah.
charge them rent. You can definitely charge them rent. And parents, I know parents who charge their children rent, and when they passed away, they left it to them in an inheritance. Charge them rent, even if you don't mean to charge them rent. If they were out on their own, they would get a lot more money, from what I'm understanding from a lot of people I've talked to, because there was a big, I think you and I had this conversation about it at one point, Kim. Now I understand what the difference is now. The difference is now, if their child is out on their own, they're getting more money than if they're living in your house with you. If they're living in your house with you, they get less money. But even at that, like I have a friend, what she says, he's just a very happy-go-lucky kid. He's still in high school, doesn't really spend. So what she does is, because there's a list of approved things you can spend it on, and like you just can't.
It's like an expense report that you're submitting every month. You have to submit that where the money was spent. So,
well, what she does is she just buys the groceries, and then like she's putting away for him to inherit that money so that he could get the money free and clear. You have to look at what you can spend it on and what you can't spend it on, but definitely apply for it now. It's better now than later. If they're at college, they could apply. They're not making any money right now, so they could apply. That's what, $500-600 a month they're getting, and they can use for spending money. If they're at college and they need to eat, we all know that end of the semester that the food points or whatever goes away, and you need to get more money for it. Well, here it is. You've got some money there. Access VR, on the other hand, does pay for all your textbooks. They have a fund that pays for textbooks. I definitely encourage parents to sign up for Access VR. There's tons of programs in there. You need to look into it. If your kid is going to college, I'd look into it, because they have programs that'll help it. Textbooks, I mean, when I was going to college, textbooks did cost money.
They still do.
They still do. I totally agree with that. It's an expense that you don't have to spend money on.
Yeah, if the resources are there and available, and I think part of the problem is that a lot of parents don't know about the resources. And I think a lot of the parents are scared to ask. And I don't know if scared is the right word, maybe hesitant to ask. But I think you just have to put it out there. Like, you know who your child is, you know how they function. You have to ask. You have to inquire, because they're not going to get, and they're not going to get.
well, you talk about Access VR, and I know like our school district now like talks about it a little bit more, but also with special education, I guess it depends on who your people are in special education, and work with you on your transition plan and tell you what's out there and help you with what's out there. And if they're not knowledgeable and they're not sharing the information, again, like you said, you have to go out and you have to be able to ask, because just because your school district is not telling you that in your transition plan of what you can have and where this is, or that school has this, or then you gotta ask, just like being the advocate for it. Because
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about our students, our kids on this a young adult end, but I can recall back when my daughter was receiving services even as a toddler. So that even then, I was thankful and grateful for the social workers, the case workers, the therapists who just, by chance would say, hey, did you know about, I was very thankful for those people who kind of crossed our paths to share what they knew. And at the same time, too, I had to ask. So even as my daughter was entering into the school district, you have to ask, because a lot of things aren't advertised. A lot of things aren't, in the handbook, to say this is there. But once you ask and you keep asking, then, I won't say miraculously, but, sometimes things appear like, we can provide such and such. But But if you
But you
never
said the
ask,
key thing there, if you don't, that's the key thing. If you don't ask, they're not gonna tell either.
right, right,
Because the school districts are paying for it. So if you're not asking and you're just, don't say anything. And it depends, because you might have a great group of people in your school district that want to say, oh, you know what we have, you know what your child could benefit from. You might have some great people that want to share that. But a lot of situations, if you don't, like you said, if you don't ask, they're not going to tell you, because it's at a cost to the school.
at a cost to them, right? Right.
So
Right.
they're not going to
So
tell.
I think
all the time.
if anything, that's one of the things that this platform, I think, unites the three of us, is that we are all very committed to
Right.
asking about the services and programs that our students can be a part of, and also encouraging other parents.
Right.
You
And
know,
I'm sure I could have asked for even more if I really, like you said, if you ask and you'll get and they'll tell. My son couldn't handle so much, so I only asked what I knew he can handle.
right, and what he needed.
And I'm sure there could have been more offered to him if I did ask. Hopefully they would have gave. But again, I knew he could only handle but so much. So, but he did in his early, school, he got everything that he needed and could handle. So the only problem I had was in the end when the pandemic had. So I can't say that it was all bad, but the end was, again, ask and keep pushing and keep asking and fight for it.
So I had a client in another school district, about an hour away from us. And I thought that school district offered a lot, an awful lot. I met the mother. The child was like yours, Kim. And the school district kept saying, oh, we want to give him an iPad. Now, prior to going to this meeting, I had met with the mother. We met halfway, and we ended up meeting in a McDonald's, I think it was. And I brought my son with me, and my son sat by himself while I had this meeting. And she met him, and she said, oh, he has autism. Oh, that's wonderful. That means my son's going to be like yours. And, their parents have to remember it's a broad spectrum.
Absolutely.
And, while I certainly hope and pray, and, there can always be a possibility that your child will end up, on that side of the spectrum. The truth of the matter was that the child was 10, still in diapers, and was nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And, who am I to say? I'm not a doctor, but when you go to a CSE meeting, you want to get services. So the mother kept saying to me, we sat at the meeting, the CSE chair would say, okay, we want to give him tongue therapy. We want to give him, throat therapy, like all these therapies that I had never met. We want to give him an iPad so that he can communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother stops the meeting and she says, did your son have any of these therapies? And I said, well, no, because my son was verbal from the time he was, a toddler. And so she said, surprised me. She said, no, thank you. I don't want those therapies.
But times have changed. Her son is also from a different generation, a different age, and therapies and findings have changed since our children were younger. There's therapies they didn't do back then that they do now, as far as communication, electronics, technology.
About the same. Now, mind you, my son was 10, and
her
son was 10.
Oh, there was this was back then.
Okay. So, and I'm sitting there going, they're throwing all these therapies at you. They're giving them to, in my district, we are fighting for them. They are throwing them at you, right? And you're saying no. So
my mother told me, even with early intervention, she said, just get him everything that they're offering, whatever they're going to give him, take it. The worst that can happen is he'll be ready when it's time to go to school and start school. Maybe he'll be ahead because now he got the therapies. He learned to read, he talk, walk, whatever it is. Just do it. It's not going to hinder him any. If anything, he's going to benefit from it and be ready and ahead. So
So-
I wasn't looking at it that way. I was looking at like, what do you mean he hasn't crossed midline? And yeah, he's a
Right.
baby, he's 6 months old. What do you know?
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
They-
But
I didn't know.
ultimately, those are the therapies that do help prepare them, you know? I mean, same thing. My daughter had feeding therapy. She had speech and language therapy. She
Mhm.
had physical therapy. She had occupational therapy. You know, they
Well,
were
they
all things that were needed along her journey. But every child at 10, at 4, at 3 does not need the same therapy.
Exactly. Well, what happened was she kept thinking that if my child didn't have it and she wants her, I understand wanting her child to be at a certain point, but they're not the same children. It doesn't matter. Your school is giving you and telling you that he needs this, which I'm telling you, I really haven't encountered that in many school districts. So for a district to say, "Oh no, you need this,"
To
it was
offer, absolutely.
what?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were, and they were saying, "Oh, we're giving him this. He needs it, so we're putting it into his IEP." And the mother was like, "No, I don't need it." So I literally stopped this meeting. I was like, "You need to come talk to me." And I was like, "What are you doing?" And she says to me, "Well, if your son didn't have them, I wanted to be able to be like your son." Now she met my son once, and I said, "No," I said, "You don't understand." I said, "My son he has autism, but it's not the same. So, but you need to get these therapies because if my son, let's just put it this way, if my son was like your son, I would be taking these therapies. All right." But then she says, "Would you take it now?" I said, "No, because my son could talk. All right. My son is can verbally express himself. Your son cannot. So you need to take these therapies because if there's a chance for your son to be able to talk by having these therapies, then you need to get these therapies. You cannot tell them no." And so she went back in there and she said, "I don't know how much good this is going to do, but my advocate says I must indulge you." I was just like, and so then the lady turns around to me and she says, "I've been trying to tell her for years now that she needs these therapies because there's a chance that there's something with the tongue and the throat and but we're not going to be able to
Right. The therapy may help awaken some of the nerve endings or some of the muscles to be
Right.
able to have the child develop the use of those muscles and be able to do the things that they're hoping for that child to be able to do. So you just never know. You just don't know what the effect of some of these therapies may have when you just look at it at face value. Like, well, why do they need that? And why do they need this? Try it. You can always say, no, at some point after you try it, I don't see this working, or I don't see this helping, or, can we come back to the drawing board and reassess and look at this again to see, whether it's making an impact. But you try it first. You just don't know. You don't know.
Right. And they had actually gone through the testing. They tested the kid and they said, this is what he needs, these therapies. I hadn't encountered a school district like this, as I said, but don't give up on the therapies. If they're giving it to you, take it. Parents need to speak to other parents. You're going to find there's more kids like your kids. You're going to find they're not all 100% cookie cutter the same, but you're going to find parents that have experienced some of the same experiences that you have. Talk to other parents. You don't know what other parents have encountered, like in this instance, going off to college, what other parents have encountered along the way. Through this platform, through social media, have said, this is what I've encountered. I want all parents to know that you need to get your child to write off a waiver just to pay a bill, all right? Because they won't even talk to you about the bill, even though you're the one that's paying the money for it. Programs, look for programs. They're being paid out, Look, I went to a special needs conference and they had a vendor fair there and Access VR there. And the guy said to me, listen, we pay for college books. I was like, really? And they said yes. So when your son gets to college, you make sure he has Access VR because we pay for their college books if they're college bound. And I was
Wait,
like,
so you keep mentioning Access VR. Do you only apply for that? Like when I was at the school district, they mentioned it for the first time when my son was 21, 22. I never even heard of it before then. But how do you apply for that? Is that something do through the state? It has to come through the school district and special education. How do you apply and get involved and
VR.
apply for
Okay.
Access VR?
So the school district applied for my son when he
Okay.
was.
And at what age can you apply for it at?
I think they start applying at 17, 18.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. I think senior year is where it is. You might not ever use any of them, but apply for them because you'd be surprised as to whether you can or you can't use those programs.
Access VR. In New York State, Access VR assists individuals with disabilities to achieve and maintain employment and to support independent living through training, education, rehabilitation and career development. For more information on Access VR, go to www.access.nysed.gov/VR or call 1-800-222-5627.
Now, okay, so the other day I was helping a friend of mine file for OPWDD. And so I went back to the school district and I said, so-and-so needs help. She needs to file for OPWDD. Her child graduated 7 years ago. So the CSC chair said, okay, so we'll go look up her files because as long as she has an IEP or something that said she has a disability in the past, then she's able to get it. So that's what she did, but also
So there's no limit of applying for OPWDD. You don't have to do it at an early age. Is it obviously better and the benefits? And you should. Okay.
I mean, because there's so many. OPWDD is another one. There's so many services that are available through OPWDD. I think that everybody should apply for it if it's available to them. There are so many wonderful programs that are associated with it. You can get respite. You can also get a life coach to help them because we do get to a certain age where, we're just mom and, we're old and we don't know what we're talking about. And we don't understand them because we were never young. Apparently we just came onto this earth at this age. A lot of the services that they offer are, really beneficial for kids, especially on the spectrum. Everybody should look up each state's version or their state's version of Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. They're not all the same, but every state should have some sort of office.
OPWDD. Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. New York State agency tasked with providing funding and services to individuals with disabilities. OPWDD allows people with disabilities to access supports and services that can help families to support their child to live in their family home. OPWDD can provide assistance for your child to live on his own in a community of his choice. OPWDD can provide assistance accessing services your child needs to live his life. OPWDD can help your child with work, volunteer or community involvement, including connecting with clinical or therapeutic supports.
You have to realize that you can't put everything all in place all at once. So just remember that you just have to take little snippets. Like we're going to focus, we as a family are going to focus on the school services that my child needs, and then you focus on that. Then at another time, you may do your research and say, okay, we need to focus on the outside therapies or support services outside to help our child. and then you focus on that. I think, you know, we all, I'm sure, you know, have at some point just felt totally overwhelmed by the needs of our children, you know, at different points, depending on what was happening in our individual lives also. But I think, you know, one of the things that we can really encourage people is you don't have to have it all at once. Don't try to get it all at once. Just take small steps to
we want to
put-
encourage people to apply for it all, even if it's all at once, because you're going to have all the same paperwork. But like OPWDD, it takes about 18 months to get.
Oh, really?
It's there. You're not going to get it tomorrow.
Oh, I thought self-direction was that slow. I didn't realize OPWD was that slow. That much of a wait right
no,
now.
I'm
That's
seriously,
slow.
I'm just really talking about
Right.
not just the applying, because the paperwork process does take a long time.
It does.
You have to start putting certain things in place early. And I know for ourselves, we definitely started later, and we're still trying to get some things
Right.
put in place. But what I meant is that sometimes we as parents get overwhelmed by, you know, someone's talking about services over here, someone's talking about services over there, and it just becomes, you know, a lot. So sometimes my husband would say, do the needful, right? What is needed right now? You know, what are the things we need right now, and the things that we can put in place that are for the next couple of years, you know, that they may not need it right now, but we know that they're going to need it in the next 1 to 2 years, you know, where you can start putting those things in place.
Well, what I say to people is they should start applying now, even if you're not going to use it. Just apply for it, because when you do need it, it'll be there, because it takes such a long time to get approved for it.
Absolutely.
That is basically it. You know, it's just because it takes forever. Even Section 8, you can be on that waiting list for 10 years. So I tell elderly people, sometimes in their 50s, they need to get on that list now, because in 10, 15 years, they'll just be getting approved for it. So, you know, it's a harsh reality, but that's what's happening.
That's where we are. Absolutely. We'd like to thank Altis for providing this platform for us to share our experiences with the community. Thank you.
And we want to remind everybody that we are mothers. We're not professionals. We're sharing our experiences so that we can help you with your autism child.
Follow us on social media. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe.